Hell on Wheels, review of part of the first season. So this is part of what I'm calling my television addiction series, when I go through and talk about all the DVDs I watched when I was living in Cambodia from 2011 to 2012 and was just watching way too many DVDs. Hell on Wheels, I got into because a coworker recommended it to me. He said he was watching it and he said it was really enjoying it. And he described the premise of it to me, which is it's about the building of the first transcontinental railroad. Now, the historical setting of this appealed to me. The building of the first transcontinental railroad is something you often hear mentioned as like a monumental event in U.S. history. More actually, people usually talk about the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, which, apparently was one of those really big changing moments in U.S. history, because now the whole country from east to west was connected by a railroad, and it made the United States more interconnected and speeded up all kinds of things and made all kinds of things possible. I don't know. It's something you often read about or hear talked about as a turning point in U.S. history. I never really thought that the building of the Transcontinental Railroad could make for interesting drama. But it turns out, if you do just a little bit of research, that the building of the Transcontinental Railroad was in effect quite interesting. And in fact, the name of the show, Hell on Wheels, is actually not some stupid name that they thought of for a cable TV show. That name actually comes from history. That's what it was called at the time. You can look this up on Wikipedia. But Hell on Wheels was the name that the journalists gave to the camps that would accompany the building of the first transcontinental railroad. So, they'd be building the track, and then while they were building the track, they would have a camp of all the workers around them. And then around all the workers, they would have the gambling and the bars and the prostitutes and all the things that were there to part the workers from their money, or to supply the workers with their needs and wants. And it was, of course, a mobile town, because as the railroad was being completed, this whole encampment with all the prostitutes and the gamblings and the bars and everything like that would follow them down, apparently. So, seems interesting, and it starts right in 1865, and again, apparently this is historical. Right at the end of the first Civil War is the time they started building this. So, in addition to kind of all the drama surrounding this crazy town that's moving with the railroad, you have a nation fresh from the Civil War where the wounds are not yet healed. One of the main characters, kind of the villain or maybe the anti-hero of the drama, is played by Colm Meaney, who, as a former Star Trek nerd, I have long been a fan of Colm Meaney. He plays the transporter chief O'Brien, Miles O'Brien, both on Star Trek The Next Generation, and then he's one of the main characters on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And he plays a guy called Thomas Durant, or Thomas Doc Durant is I guess his nickname, who's a real historical figure. And I'm sure they took all sorts of liberties with him, but he was the real impetus behind getting this built. And he's portrayed in this TV series as very much an amoral businessman who's very corrupt, only cares about money, but was the kind of driving personality that you needed to get a project like this done. Now, the main character is somebody whose name I forget. But anyways, the main character, whatever his name was plays a Southern soldier. He's like a former Southerner and slaveholder who was on the Confederate side of the Civil War. And his family was killed by Union soldiers in some sort of a massacre. So now that the war is over, he wants to get revenge on the Union soldiers who killed his wife and son. And this is his mission, to sneak in and get the revenge on them. And some of these Union soldiers that he's tracking down are working or involved with this Hell on Wheels town. So he's in there and he's part of this Hell on Wheels, but he's also trying to track down the people who killed his family and get his revenge. And then he also makes friends with a former slave who's played by the rapper Common. This former slave is out to get revenge on his former master. And then there's Indians who attack, and there's a whole bunch of different stuff going on. So it all sounds very interesting. And the first few episodes, I was definitely giving it the benefit of the doubt. Because it seemed like it had the potential to get really good. But then I, very soon after, started to get a little bit bored with it. And it wasn't that it was terrible. It's just that it wasn't spectacular. And again, during this period where I was living in Cambodia, I just had access to so many DVDs. They were so cheap and they were all being sold, that it was... If something wasn't really grabbing you, it was so easy to get distracted by something else. I think part of the problem is the whole revenge storyline. It doesn't really hook you that much. I mean, we all know that the revenge movie is a very famous type of exploitation movie. Quentin Tarantino, and Quentin Tarantino was influenced by those 1970s revenge movies. And those revenge movies are okay for a couple hours. But the question of whether or not somebody gets their revenge, I think, is something that's a little bit hard to get invested on. Maybe he'll get his revenge and maybe he'll kill all those guys, or maybe he won't get his revenge and a couple of those guys will escape. Unless, and especially when, from the audience's point of view, when he's getting his revenge for characters that died off screen or characters who were dead before the series even started. It's not like the audience has grown to care about these characters. The audience only cares about his revenge scheme, because we are supposed to buy into his character and we feel his pain or something like that. But it's not like the audience itself has kind of fond memories of these characters or really feels the need to have them revenged, if you know what I'm saying. For instance, if you have a show that's, say, be going on for a couple seasons and a couple beloved characters in that show get killed, then you have more of an invested interest in seeing what the resolution of that is and seeing that the people who did it get their just desserts. You've got to make the audience get invested in the tragedy for the revenge narrative to really have pull. It's fine for a couple hours, but something that keeps you coming back episode after episode after episode, when you've got like 10 episodes to get through in a season and plenty of other DVDs to get distracted by, you need something stronger to pull you through than that revenge narrative. And there's other stuff going on in the series, but nothing that really grabbed my interest. I was reading the AV Club at the time, a website I used to frequent quite regularly then. I still read them now, but back then, I used to watch an episode of TV and then go to the AV Club to read their review of that episode, and then watch another episode and then go to the AV Club. I quite liked their critics. Their critics were generally more intelligent than I am. Actually, we can get rid of that generally completely. Their critics were much more intelligent than I am. So their commentary always gave me a good basis for what I had missed or what a more intelligent person would think about it. And they started out optimistic about Hell on Wheels, but as that first season went on, they started pointing out all the ridiculous character motivations and things that really didn't make sense about the way the characters were acting. And I actually had picked up on a fair amount of this even before I read their reviews. One thing that they kept saying, and a couple other reviewers as well, I've heard this as well, they kept comparing it to Deadwood and saying, this is a show that's trying to be Deadwood and just can't do it. Or, other reviewers I've heard say this is a poor man's version of Deadwood. Or some reviewers actually said they liked it better than Deadwood because they thought it was less pretentious than Deadwood. But Deadwood seemed to be the common point of comparison. And I thought to myself, well, what am I doing? I haven't even seen Deadwood yet. And Deadwood, by all accounts, by all reputation, is just a classic piece of television. I think it was even more popular, had an even better reputation 10 years ago. People maybe are starting to forget about it a little bit now, but 10 years ago, it had a reputation as being prestige TV, up there with The Wire and Breaking Bad and The Sopranos and all the other classics. So I abandoned Hell on Wheels and watched Deadwood instead. And I'll talk about Deadwood in my next review.